Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Aleph, and we will be learning today B'Yas Hashem Tav Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Tzitzis, and we pick up today on the very bottom of Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph, Siman Yud Aleph Sif Ches. Says the Mechaber, Hamishtachave lebehema. If somebody bows down to a behema, somebody worships a behema as avodah zarah chas v'chalila. Says the Mechaber, Samra, the wool of that animal, pasal l'tzitzits, may not be used to manufacture the strings for tzitzits. It's pasal for tzitzis. Hamishtachave lepishtan. However, let's say somebody bows down to pishtan, somebody bows down lepishtan notua, to plants of flax that's still mechubar lekarka, somebody bows down to that, and then proceeds to cut it down and manufacture strings out of the linen, kosher l'tzitzis, that would be kosher for tzitzis, shaharei nishtana, because it has undergone a major shinui. It was changed during the manufacturing process. Okay, what's at play over here? What's going on? So let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah, Ois Katan Lamed Hey, here on Chaf Aleph Amud Beis. The Mechaber said, Hamishtachave lebehema, if somebody bowed down and he served an animal, chas v'chalila, as avodah zarah, so the Mechaber said, Samra pasal l'tzitzis, the wool of the animal is pasal for tzitzis. Says the Chavetz Chaim, after davar hane'avad einoi aser elo lekarbon, even though the truth is that when it comes to a behema that was worshipped as avodah zarah is not aser bahana. Normally, if a yid worships something as avodah zarah, it becomes aser bahana. Even if a guy worships something for avodah zarah, unless he's mevatel it, unless he nullifies it, he cancels it out as being avodah zarah, it's aser bahana. But a balchai, a living animal, does not become aser bahana when it is worshipped as avodah zarah. It becomes prohibited to be used as a carbon. It's aser lahakrava, but it's not aser bahana. And the truth is that these two dinim, one is learnt out from the other. In Parshas Vayikra, the Torah Dirshu says, Daber el b'nei Yisrael va'amarta aleihem. Rabbi Shem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, you should speak to the Klal Yisrael and say to them, Adam ki yakriv mikem carbon laHashem, a person who brings a carbon to Hashem, min habehema, from the animals, min habakar, from the cattle, umin hatzain, or from the flock, takrivu as karbanchem, they should bring their karbanos. Now, each one of these phrases in the pasuk, min habehema, from the behemoths, min habakar, min hatzain, Chazal learn every one of those as being exclusive. When the Torah Dirshu says that you could bring a carbon min habehema, from the animals, the implication is that there are some animals that are kosher for hakrava, and there are some animals that are not kosher la hakrava. So, for example, when it says min habehema, Chazal learn out veloy kula. Not all animals are kosher la hakrava, lahiti es haroiva ve'es hanirva. For example, you cannot bring as a carbon an animal that was used in bestiality. So it's min habehema, veloy kula, from the animals, but not all of the animals. So too, when the pasuk says min habakar, from the cattle, we learn out lahaitzi es hane'evad. That comes to exclude an animal that was worshipped as avodah zarah. You could bring an animal, you could bring a carbon min habakar, but not all bakar, because bakar, cattle, an animal that was nevad, that was worshipped as avodah zarah, is pasal for hakrava. Now, based on the fact that the Torah Kedosha saw a need to give us a drasha of min habakar to exclude an animal that was nevad, we learn out, so it's aser for a carbon, but it's not aser lahediot. It's not aser bahana for regular usage. Regular avodah zarah, if somebody goes ahead and makes an idol, he builds an idol, and now he goes ahead and worships the idol, that idol is aser lahediot. It's even aser bahana for any usage at all. Now, if that would apply even to Balachayim, why would the Torah Akdosha tell us that you can't bring it as a carbon? We know it's completely Aser Bahana. So if the Torah Akdosha went out of its way to tell me Min HaBakar, to tell me that Min HaBakar v'loikula l'hoitzi es hanevad, to tell me that an animal that was worshipped as Avodah Zarah cannot be brought as a carbon, we see from there that it's Aser for a carbon, but it's not Aser lehedyet, it's not Aser Bahana. Now there are various reasons given why that's true. One is because it's Nasa B'dei Shamayim, it's not Nasa Yidei Adam, so there's a different din. But whatever it is, the bottom line is that an animal that was nevad is not Aser Bahana. Therefore, the Chavetz Chaim says like this. The Mechaber says that if you worship an animal, the strings of the wool that comes from that animal is pasal v'tzitzis. Says the Chavetz Chaim here in Ois Katan Lamed Hey, after davar anevad einoi aser elo lekarbon, even though a Baal Chai, an animal that was worshipped as Avodah Zarah, is only aser to be used as a carbon, aval lehedyet shari, but for mundane usages it is mutter, it's not aser ba'ana, so why can't you use it as tzitzis? Explains the Chavetz Chaim, nevertheless, aser lemitzvah tzitzis, it is prohibited to use this wool for the mitzvah of tzitzis. Why? Hayil v'tzarchei gavayahu, since the mitzvah is tzarchei gavaya. If you're using it in the performance of a mitzvah, that means you're using it for shamayim. You're using it l'shem shamayim. It's tzarchei gavaya. Ma'us klape gavaya. This wool is ma'us. It's reprehensible. It's something that was used in the worship of Avodah Zarah. So it's a davar ma'us. It's a reprehensible klape gavaya, and therefore you cannot use it in the mitzvah of tzitzis. The same way you can't use it as a carbon because it's ma'us, you can't use it in the performance of a mitzvah. You can't use it for Avodas Hashem if it's a davar ma'us, klape gavaya. And the Chavetz Chaim explains, this pertains to the wool of the animal, hayil d'lo yishtani kol kach, because even though you shear the wool off the animal, and then you card it, and you comb it, and you spin it into threads, and then you twist it into strings, even though you're certainly changing it from its status as raw wool on the animal to now what it strings for tzitzits, but it's lo yishtani kol kach. It's not a very significant change. Da'adayin chazusei alav, it still has the general appearance of wool, v'nireh shehu tzemer, and it is very obvious that it's wool. But this stands in contrast to the next halacha that the Mechaber said, which was that if somebody worships pishton, if somebody worships flax while it was still attached to the ground, and then manufactures string out of it, then you can use it for tzitzis. Why? This stands in contrast to somebody who bows down and worships flax that is planted, that's still growing from the ground. That's like a tree. And now when you change it, when you manufacture strings out of it, its original appearance is gone. The item that you worshipped is no longer here. So the distinction that the Chavetz Chaim is bringing is like this. The Mechaber told me two different halachas. The Mechaber said if you bow down to a behema, somebody chas v'chalila worships a sheep, the wool of that sheep cannot be used to manufacture tzitzits. Why not? Because it's mos. You're making a very significant change, right? You worshipped the animal. Now you're going to shear the wool. You're going to have to card it. You're going to have to comb it. You're going to have to spin it into thread. You're going to have to do shazira. You're going to have to twist it into strings. So there's a very significant change between what the person worshipped and now the tzitzis threads that he wants to use. Says the Chavetz Chaim, that change is not significant enough. It still looks like wool. It's still recognizable as wool. And this wool is mos. This wool is reprehensible klape gavaya because it was used in the worship of Avodah Zarah, and therefore it's possible for tzitzis. The second halacha of the Mechaber was somebody worshipped pishtan notua, flax that was planted that was still attached to the ground. Excuse me. Flax that's been mechuber. In that case, said the Mechaber, that's kosher l'tzitzis. Why is it kosher l'tzitzis? It's a davar mos. Explain the Mechaber, shaharei nishtana, because it changed. What do you mean it changed? Well, flax that's growing like a plant from the ground is a plant. It's a tree. Now, you'll tell me wool while it's on the sheep is an animal. It's true, but the wool that's on the animal, and then the wool that the tzitzis strings are made out of, it's all wool. It's all very recognizable as wool. Not so by the flax. When the flax is growing from the ground, it has a totally different appearance than when it's going to be manufactured into linen strings, and therefore it's considered a shinui. And so what? So does a shinui. The point of the shinui is that what you worshipped is not here anymore. The person worshipped pishton natua. He worshipped growing flax. Now you have strings. It's not the same thing that he worshipped. And since it's not the same thing that he worshipped, it is not considered mos anymore, and it's not possible for use in tzitzis. Ois kat lamed vav. Puzzle. Ayin b'simen tavkuf pei vav b'magen Avram sif kat vav. He sends us to Siman tavkuf pei vav, which Baruch Hashem we learned together. That's Hilchos Rosh Hashanah. It's talking about the halachas of shofar. The masik where the Magen Avram concludes that according to the opinion of the Mechaber over there in Hilchos Rosh Hashanah, Hai Pasal in a rak lechatchila mishum demos. This pasal, when the Mechaber says that this wool is pasal for tzitzits, it's only lechatchila because it's a davar mos, it's reprehensible. Aval b'diavad yatza. But if somebody did manufacture tzitzit strings out of this wool of the animal that was nevad, and he took it and he put it on a beged of daled kanfas, he's yaitza, b'diavad he's yaitza. V'chein kasav hagra b'simin zed l'ini diavad b'machloikis shenuya, that the halacha of b'diavad over here is totally on a machloikis, but the mechaber holds that this halacha is only lechatchila. But b'diavad it's taka kosher. How do we see this in Hilchos Rosh Hashanah? Because in Hilchos Rosh Hashanah we're talking about a shofar where the shofar was nevad. Somebody worshipped the shofar, and over there we're talking about a case where again it's only asur because it's mos. We're talking about over there the case of a shofar that was the avodah zarah of an Eino Yehudi, and since it was the avodah zarah of an Eino Yehudi, it has the potential for the Eino Yehudi to be mavatal the avodah zarah. Therefore, the Mechaber says b'diavad it's kosher to be used. L'chatchila, you're not supposed to use it because it's mos, it's reprehensible. It's mos klapik avaya because it was used in the worship of avodah zarah. But b'diavad, the Mechaber said you could use it. B'diavad, if somebody heard shofar from such a shofar, he would be yaitza. So you see that this psul of davar mos klapik avaya, according to the Mechaber, is only psul l'chatchila, not b'diavad. Ois kat lamed zayin. The Mechaber said it's possible at tzitzits. Kasav oilas tamid. The Chavetz Chaim tells us the oilas tamid writes that tzemer shahaya aleha be'es hishtachavoya ne'eseres. The oilas tamid says that the wool that was on the animal when the animal was worshipped, that wool is aser and it's possible for tzitzits. The chol shekein mashagadol achakach, and certainly any wool that grows in the future is going to be aser. Now, the svara of the oilas hatamid seems to be very, very similar. Like I told you earlier, the halacha of a bal chai that was nevad is different than the halacha of something else. Somebody makes an idol and it's nevad, it becomes aser b'hana. Somebody worships a bal chai, it doesn't become aser b'hana. It's only aser b'hakrava. It's aser as a carbon. We can't use it as tzitzis because it's mos. The same halachas really apply to growing things like trees. If somebody worships a tree, the tree does not become aser b'hana. If it's b'mechuber, if it's attached to the ground, it doesn't become aser b'hana. But what grows on the tree later, the new growth of the tree, is aser b'hana, because that new growth already grew after the tree was designated as an avodah zarah, so it becomes aser. So the oilas tamid says that, well, when we look at an animal, The wool that's on the animal is usr because it was on the animal when the animal was worshipped, and memela, that wool is mos. That wool is reprehensible because it was worshipped as avodah zarah. So too the wool that will grow in the future is also puzzle. Even though, wait a second, I didn't worship that wool. That wool wasn't there when I worshipped the animal, but it doesn't matter. Once you worship the animal, the Elas HaTamid says, now anything that grows in the future is growing on an animal of Avodah Zarah. So Mamela, what grows in the future is going to be Aser. So says the Elas HaTamid. However, the Chavetz Chaim continues here in Nice Kat Lam Zayin, and he says, Ube Sefer B'nei Chia Kasav Lehepech. The Sefer B'nei Chia says quite the opposite. He says, Damasha Gadol Acher Shenevad Mutter. What grows after the animal was worshipped is mutter. And what's his svara? His svara is, like I said a couple of minutes ago, why should it be usher? It wasn't here when I worshipped the animal. This wool was never worshipped. Now, we already saw the concept by Pishtan, right? By the Pishtan, somebody worshipped the growing flax. So, okay, if now he cuts down the flax and he manufactures strings, those strings are going to be kosher l'tzitzits. Why? Because we said it underwent a shinui. So what? So it underwent a shinui. So what? The point is, if it underwent a shinui, it's not the item that was worshipped. The item that was worshipped was the flax that was mechubar l'karka. That's what was worshipped. The strings that were manufactured from the plant are very, very different from the plant. Memela, the thing that you worshipped is gone. These strings, you never worshipped these strings, so these strings are mutter. Says the Sefer B'nei Chia, so too over here. If somebody worshipped an animal, so the wool that was on the animal when the animal was worshipped, that's usher because that's mos. But the wool that grows now is not the wool that was worshipped. So the Sefer B'nei Chia says that wool should be mutter. So here we have a machlekes, the Sefer Elas HaTamid and the Sefer B'nei Chia. Continues the Mishnah Berurah. Ube Berhetev Kasav, the Berhetev writes, the Gam HaTaz Sover Kain. Now the Taz agrees with this Sefer B'nei Chia, B'Siman Tafresh B'Tesiv Kotnei, Vayin Sham El Yerabba, Ube Pri Megadim. Ois Kat Lam Ches. The Mechaber was referring to somebody who worshipped Pishtan Notua, Pishtan that was still planted, it was still Mechubar L'Karka. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Aval Pishtan Shu Nekar. How about if somebody worships Pishtan that's not mechubar l'karka? It's not yet manufactured into strings, but it's already harvested. It's already cut down. What's the halacha then? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Pishtan shu nekar. If somebody worships flax that was already cut off from the ground, az neser afilu lehedyet. That's also bahana, because that's like an idol. See again, remember what we said. If somebody worships an idol, that idol is aser afilu lehedyet. That idol is aser bahana completely. We have a different din by something that's mechubar l'karka, something that's still attached to the ground, or a balchai, or a living animal. Those do not become aser bahana if you worship them. So over here, if somebody worshipped pishtan notua, so then the strings manufactured from it are going to be kosher l'tzitzits because it underwent a significant shinui. If somebody worships pishtan that's nekar, if somebody worships pishtan that was already cut off of the ground, that's going to be aser to be used for tzitzits because that's completely aser bahana. Kedin avodah zarah v'tikrafta, like the regular din of avodah zarah, like somebody who worships an idol. That idol is aser bahana v'tikrafta, or something that was brought as a sacrifice to avodah zarah. Ve'ena moyeloi shinui. And now you'll tell me, well, it should be mutter for tzitzits because I worshipped it when it was harvested, but then I manufactured strings out of it, and that's a significant shinui. Over here, a significant shinui doesn't help because it's aser bahana. Because the halacha of avodah zarah is anything that's aser bahana is avodah zarah. Whatever you make out of that item, even if there is a significant shinui, is still aser bahana. Just as a little bit of a side point, I find this Ois Katan Lam Ches a little bit interesting, and I'll tell you why. The main point of Ois Katan Lam Ches over here is that the Mishnah Berurah is telling us the halacha. The Mechaber told us the halacha of somebody who worshipped Pishtan Notua, flax that was still connected to the ground and was still growing. Over there, the Mechaber told us if you then cut it down and manufacture strings, those strings could be used for tzitzis because of a significant shinui. The Mishnah Berurah is coming to tell us the halacha of somebody who worshipped not pishton natua, somebody who worshipped pishton that was already nekar, pishton that was already cut off of the ground. Over there, the Chavetz Chaim says, since it's not mechubar lekarka, as soon as somebody worships it, it becomes aser b'hana. And since it's aser b'hana, says the Mishnah Berurah, it certainly cannot be used as tzitzis. Well, why not? What exactly stops us from using these strings as tzitzis? Well, it's aser b'hana. So what? Mitzvah slav lahanas nitnu. We've learned the concept already many times that the performance of a mitzvah is not considered the derivation of hana. When we use something to perform a mitzvah, to fulfill a mitzvah, we don't say that that means that we derived benefit from it. Because mitzvahs lav lahanas nitnu, mitzvahs were not given to us by the Rabbanim Shalom for our hana, for our pleasure. No, it's an obligation. We have an obligation. We have a chiyuv to the Bari Olam to do this mitzvah. So it's not a benefit, it's not a hana. So mitzvahs lav lahanas nitnu. So to say that the reason we can't use the pishton nekar is because it's aser b'hana and we're deriving hana, at face value that seems to be problematic because mitzvahs lav lahanas nitnu. On the other hand, it could be that mitzvahs lav lahanas nitnu does not apply to tzitzis, and we're going to have to see more about that as we go on. I think we might find the answer as we go on, because how could you say mitzvahs lav lahanas nitnu by tzitzis if the whole chiyuv of tzitzis is to put tzitzis on a beged? And how do we determine whether or not something is a beged? Well, in order to be a beged, it has to be something that we wear for protection. It has to be something that we wear for protection from the cold or for shade from the sun. So inherent in a beged is the fact that we're going to derive hana from it. If we don't derive hana from it, then l'chayre it's not chayiv in tzitzis. So maybe it doesn't pass to say mitzvahs lav lahanas nitnu by tzitzis. So there's another reason why you can't be yoitza with tzitzis that are aser b'hana, and that is that if it's aser b'hana as avodah zarah, well, we learned yesterday that one of the requirements of tzitzis is lahem misha lahem. The tzitzis have to belong to you. Now, something that you're not allowed to derive hana from doesn't really belong to you. It's like we learned about chametz on Pesach, right? In Yonah D'Yoma. Chametz on Pesach is aser b'hana. And since it's aser b'hana, it's really not yours. The Gemara tells us that there are two things that don't belong to a person that the Torah Hakdosha says belong to you in the context of a mitzvah or a chiyuv. One is a barber Rishus Harabim. Somebody goes into Rishus Harabim and he digs a pit. It doesn't belong to him. It's Rishus Harabim. It doesn't belong to him. Yet, if an animal falls into that pit and gets hurt or dies, the one who dug the bar is chayiv. Why? He didn't fall into my bar. It's not my bar. It's Rishus Harabim. Doesn't matter. The Torah Hakdosha made it your bar in the context of being mechayiv you to pay for the damage that it does. So too chametz on Pesach. You'll say, well, wait a second. Chametz on Pesach is aser b'hana. So how could you tell me that I'm over a lav? Bal Yirah, Bal Yamotzei? Because I own chametz on Pesach. I don't own it. It's not mine. It's aser b'hana. The chiddush is that the Torah Hakdosha says that in context of the lav of Bal Yirah, Bal Yamotzei, it does belong to you, even though you really have no ownership on it because it's aser b'hana. So too, if tzitzits become aser b'hana, then you can't say that you're being mekayim lahem misha lahem. It's not yours. It's aser b'hana. Also, could we say ketuse mechta shiure? If it's aser b'hana, which means it's oimid l'sreifa, in that case we say ketuse mechta shiure. It's as if it's already ground up. It's as if it's already burnt up. We know tzitzits have a minimum shear. There's a minimum length that they have to be. If it's ketuse mechta shiure, you don't have the minimum size. So these are all possible reasons of exactly why you cannot be yoitza if it's aser b'hana as avodah zarah. Okay, now we go to Siftes. 2 lines down, Chaf Aleph Amud Beis in the Shulchan Aruch. Now the Mechaber starts to embark on the details of precisely how we affix the tzitzis to the beged. Says the Mechaber, Yasen nekev ba'orech hatalos. you have to make a hole in the length of the talus. You've got a talus cutting over here, right? So this is the length. Actually, this is a good question of precisely what's called the length and what's called the width, and we're going to see that a bit later. But for the ease of explanation today, I'm going to say that this is the length over here. I'm pausing. The reason I'm pausing is because I just put on a beged of tzitzis that I certainly didn't intend on putting on, and I didn't pater it with my bracha on my talis gadol this morning. So l'chera, I have to make a bracha on this talis katan. So I'm just doing a quick bedika here because I haven't worn this talis katan in a while. So I'm doing a quick bedika. I'm checking the strings on the talis katan, even though l'chera, well, yeah, I guess I have to because the bracha is really going only on this pair. It's not going on the other pairs that I'm wearing. L'chera. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvos v'tzivanu al mitzvos tzitzis. Okay, so here we have a talis katan. Says the mechaber, Yasen nekev, you should make a hole, ba'orech hatalis, in the length of the talis, you got to make a hole in the beged in order to be able to attach the tzitzis. And there we have. Let's see what the right way to show this on the camera is. Okay, there we have said hole. We have a hole in the beged. Yasen nekev ba'orech hatalis, make a hole in the length of the talis. Loy l'mayla mishalosh etzbos, you should not make it higher than 3 etzbos, 3 finger breadths. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, you see I got 3 fingers over there. You see my pinky down there at the bottom? Let me put my pinky all the way down at the edge of the beged, and then I've got my last 3 fingers. And you see the hole. If I could show you the hole. I'm so bad at this audio-visual stuff. Okay, you can see it's up there. Okay, so the hole should not be higher than 3 finger breadths off the bottom of the beged. Hainu Gudlin. The Ramah says that when we're talking about 3 finger breadths, he means 3 thumb widths. And we're going to see what the Mishnah Berurah has to say about that. Why can't you make the hole higher than that? If I want to say higher, I really have to hold it this way. Why should the hole be within 3 finger breadths of the bottom? Why can't it be higher? Why can't it be up here? Says the Mechaber, Mipnei she'enoi nikra kanaf, because the Torah Kedosha says that you're supposed to make the tzitzis, v'asu lahem tzitzis al kanfei bigdeihem. You have to make the tzitzis on the corner. Now, if you make the hole where the tzitzis are going to be affixed to the beged more than 3 finger breadths off the end of the beged, that's no longer considered that it's on the corner. It's not on the corner. It's on the beged proper. The corner is down at the bottom, at the end of the beged, within 3 finger breadths of the end of the beged. That's what's called corner. Now, what makes that called corner? I believe the answer is that we know in Hilchas Tumah V'Tara, in order for a piece of fabric to be considered a beged that could be makabel tumah, a tiny scrap of fabric cannot be makabel tumah because it's nothing. In order for it to be called a beged that could be makabel tumah, it has to be 3 etzbos by 3 etzbos. It has to be at least 3 etzbos by 3 etzbos square, because that's already considered a choshev, a piece of fabric. It's something that can be used as a patch. So that's already choshev. So if we have to designate a certain amount of the beged as being the knaf, as being a chashuv entity in of its own to be called a knaf, that's a piece. That's gimel etzbais by gimel etzbais. So if the hole where the tzitzis are being attached are more than 3 etzbais off the edge of the beged, it's no longer on the corner. It's on the beged proper. So therefore, says the Mechaber, I'm going to read again from the beginning of Sif Tes, Yase Nekev, you should make a hole in the beged, ba'arech hatalis, along the length of the talis, loy l'mayla mishalish etzbais, not more than 3 finger breadths off the end of the beged, hainu gudlin, by finger breadths we mean the width of the joint of the thumb, mipnei she'ena nikra kanaf, because higher than that is not called kanaf. V'loy lamata mikashir sheyesh mikesher gudel, you also can't make it all the way at the bottom of the beged. At the bottom of the beged is also not proper. How much must you come off the bottom of the beged? The amount of space that there is from the tip of the thumb, from the knuckle of the thumb until the end of the nail. That's how much? Over there. That's how much you have to come, at least that much off of the end of the beged. Why? Says the Mechaber, Mishum shenemar al hakanaf, because it says that the tzitzis should be on the kanaf. V'im hayalamata mimaloi kesher gudel, and if it's lower than that, hayatachas hakanaf. That's not called on the corner. That would be called under the corner. So the Mechaber has given us 2 shiurim over here for the position of the hole that the tzitzis are going to go through. We have a maximum shear that the hole cannot be higher than 3 finger breadths, because then it's not called on the corner, then it's called on the beged proper. It's not called al hakanaf, it's called al ha-beged. At the same token, it can't be too far down, because if it's too far down, then it's called tachas hakanaf. It's not called al hakanaf. The height, it can't be higher than 3 finger breadths, and it can't be lower than from the middle knuckle of the thumb to the tip of the fingernail. It can't be less than that. Says the Mishnah Berurah Lamates. Yasa nekev, you should make a hole. And here we're going to see the very interesting minig that some people have. My tzitzis, my talis cutting over here, as you can see, there is 1 hole in the beged. So you take 4 strings, you put the 4 strings through the hole, you put them out, pull them out the other side, here's the loop, and then you make 2 knots, and then you make your gedil. You make the braided portion of the tzitzis. So I've got 1 hole. There is a minig to make 2 holes. Now, if you make 2 holes, then the tzitzis comes off of the beged kind of like that. It goes, the 4 strings go in 1 hole and come out right away. So it goes in like this and it comes out like that. And the gedil is hanging off of the 2 holes on the corner of the beged, like this. So it doesn't go through with a loop going around. It actually comes directly off of 2 holes on the beged itself. Says the Mishnah Berurah says, after yesh oimrim, even though there are those that say that really you should make 2 holes in the corner of the beged that looks like the nekudos tetzere, 2 dots right next to each other. So now what you do if you have the 2 holes is you have 2 holes, one right next to the other, and the tzitzis go in and come out, and the tzitzis are hanging off one side of the beged. The Beis Yosef says you should not concern yourself with that shita. You shouldn't be knowing that shita. And if somebody tries to be machmir to do that minig of the 2 holes, we don't call him a machmir. We don't call him somebody who's being righteously stringent on himself. Ela min hamasmiyin. He's somebody who's doing something that's a wonder. He's doing something that you look at and you say, what's that guy doing? Demechzi kiyuara. because he's looking like a balgaiva, like, he's saying, me, I'm an old godel. I have to wear tzitzits with 2 holes. 1 hole's not good enough for me. Ad kadlu shoyna. That's what the Beis Yosef says. However, Bach Kosav, the Bach writes, the Metal's cotton, Yasesh Stein Kovim. The Bach writes that in a Hinami, in the Tal's cotton, you should use 2 holes. In the Tal's Godel, you should use 1 hole. In the Tal's cotton, you should use 2 holes. The Bazele Mexi Kiyura Kevin Nir Al Kol. You don't have to worry about Mexi Kiyura. You don't have to worry about looking like a Balgaiva on the Tal's cotton, because the corners of the Tal's cotton are not so visible to everybody that everybody should look at it, and it's like you're being a big shot by wearing a talus like that. V'chein kosev b'kavanos, and so too it says in the Sefer HaKavanos she'ha'ari zekrein l'avracha noag kain, that's the way the Ari Zal was noig. Amnam b'Birkei Yosef kosev she'heid maharash she'mereinu Rav Chaim Vital aviv lo'noag kain. The Birkei Yosef says that he brings down that from she'heid maharash, that Rav Chaim Vital was not noyik to have 2 holes. V'chein nispashet aminig b'medinas Poland, amanam b'medinas Hagar v'Ashkenaz ein noyigin kain v'nahara upashte. And the Chavetz Chaim says nahara upashte. There's different ways of doing things, and each community that does it its way could do it its way, and it is not problematic. Now, what is the source, or not the source? What's behind the thinking of the 2 holes versus the 1 hole? So one svara that's given for the 2 holes is that if you have 1 hole, you put in the 4 strings in the hole, and now you end up with 4 strings coming out of the front and 4 strings coming out of the back. That might look to somebody like you have 8 strings of tzitzits in the corner, and you're only supposed to have 4. Masha'eken, if you have the 2 dots, so now you have 4 strings on the same side, then it's clear that it's only 4 strings, it's not 8 strings. As far as the minig of looping it through, that's escaping me this minute. I'll try to remember it. Also very interesting is, why do you have to do this at all? Why do you need holes? Why do the tzitzits have to go through holes at all? Why can't you just make the gedil of tzitzits, make this psil, and sew it to the garment? Why does it have to be tied on in this way, with a loop going through, or with the 2 holes? Something that we can speak about. Okay. Ois cut mem, the Mechaber said that you should make this hole ba'irich in the length of the beged. Ayin l'kamei b'Mishnah Berurah of cotton and beis masha kasav dusham, and we'll get there, Mir Hashem. And that's what I was referring to when I said exactly what's called the length and what's called the width. We're gonna have to see as we go along. Mem aleph loyla ma'ila mishalosh. We should not make the hole higher than 3 finger breadths off the bottom of the beged. Why, says the Mishnah Berurah, Delay mikri knaf habeged. Because if you go higher than 3 finger breadths off the end of the beged, that's not called the corner. That's not called the kanaf. That's called the beged proper. The Torah kasva al kanfe b'gdeim. The Torah tells you to put it on the kanaf, and now you're putting it over the kanaf. V'ayim b'beis Yosef shekasav d'shalish et spais b'tzimtzum mutar laharchik. The Beis Yosef says you could go exactly three finger breadths. V'laseis achar kach hanekev sham. You could space out 3 finger breadths and make the hole right above the 3 finger breadths. That would be okay. Hang on there 1 second. Okay. He says that would be okay. So it doesn't have to be within 3 finger breadths. According to the Beis Yosef, it could be right above the 3 finger breadth mark. But many poskim disagree with this Beis Yosef, and they hold the mikaven to have a shalish at spice. Once you go over 3 finger breadths, su beged mikri, that location is already called beged v'loy kanaf. And therefore, therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, we should take great care that the hole should be within 3 finger breadths of the bottom. The Magen Avraham writes, let's say you goofed and you made the hole higher than 3 finger breadths off the bottom, and you put in the tzitzits. Asa chutin shalabegit ktsarim v'niskaplu aknafos v'hu lamata mishalosh puzzle. See, let's look at this. And I'm going to hold it this way just for the ease of illustration. Let's say the hole was more than 3 finger breadths off the bottom of the beged, even though I'm holding the bottom up. So what I'm calling the bottom is located at the top. But you see, what happens is, when you make the loop and you tie the tzitzits on, you scrunch up the fabric. So let's say the hole is really more than 3 finger breadths away from the end. But by virtue of tying it on, you scrunch up the fabric, and now it's less than 3 finger breadths. So is that a problem? Really, if you flatten out the beged and you measure from the hole to the end of the beged, really it's more than 3 finger breadths. But since by tying it on and tying the knot tight, you scrunched the fabric up, now it looks like it's less than 3 finger breadths. What's the halacha? So we just said over here that he brought down for the Magen Avram that it's still puzzle. Because the bottom line is, even though it doesn't look like it's 3 finger breadths off the bottom, it's only because you scrunched it up. But if you flatten it out and you measure the fabric, how much fabric is there? There's shalish etzbais of fabric. Shalish etzbais is a sheer beged, like we said in the halachas of Tumah v'Tahara. 3 etzbais is a sheer beged. If it's a sheer beged, if you're higher than that, you're off the knaf and you're on the beged. And v'chein the opposite way. If you made the hole on the bottom, we said that the hole is supposed to be within from the last, from the joint, the knuckle of the thumb till the fingernail. The hole is supposed to be that distance off the bottom. If it's closer than that to the bottom, it's no good, because then it's called takas hakonaf. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, let's say you did properly. You made the hole that height off the bottom. But now, now you tied it and you scrunched up the fabric, niskapala beged, so it got scrunched up, achu pakas mikesher agudel. Now it looks like the hole is too close to the bottom. That's not a problem, kosher. Because really, it is in the proper space. It's just a question of looks, because you scrunched up the fabric of the kanaf. Okay, I know we already did the mechaber on Ois Katan Membeis, but we're going to stop over here. We'll continue next time, Yetz Hashem, with Ois Katan Membeis. Thank you so much for joining me for Liman HaTorah. Schus of Liman HaTorah should be megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rosh should send Yeshua's for us, Parnasim should duchem to all those in need, and we should be zeicher to see the B'Yeskel Tzedek. B'mher v'yameinu, amen. Be well.